Hello everyone, today we'll keep talking about the vector APIs. So we mentioned about push, pop, append, and length last time. Today we'll start with borrow. So borrow is basically get, so you put in the vector and tell it which index you want to access, and it will return a reference for you. Well, there are two kinds of borrow. The first returns a immutable reference, while the second returns mutable reference. So we need to pay attention that the value returned by the borrow function is references, whether it's mutable or immutable. So here we have this first borrow function. So it will just take a reference of the vector and an index. And the second borrow function is borrow mutable, borrow mute. So as you can imagine, it will take a mutable reference of that vector and again an index. So that's just two ways two kind of borrow functions that we could use. Okay, so these are all references. But what if you want to get a copy of the actual value? Then you need to dereference it, as we mentioned earlier in previous sections. And if you don't want the copy, you want exactly the same object, then you need to use pop function from previous section. Okay, so that's borrow. The next function is contains. Now, suppose you want to check if some element is in a vector, you would use contains. Don't forget the as here. So be careful that we're actually checking the reference here. So use contains and the reference of the vector and also the reference of the element you wanna check. So here, remember, this is not an index, but an element of a vector. Because remember that our vector is 1, 2, 3, so 2 is one of the elements. That's why you need to add the ampersand here. Okay, you could also do is empty here to check if the vector is empty. Also, you pass in the reference of that vector. Also, you can do index of. Again, you would pass a vector and a reference of an element. Then it will return a tuple for you. So here, why is a tuple? So the first in the tuple is telling you if the element exists in the vector or not. And the second one is telling you the actual index. So basically, it's like doing two things. Contains and index of. But if the first one is false, then the second is going to be 0. Like we can try here if we do this, like vector index of %b, %3. It will just return false and 0. Okay. So the next part is about reverse and swap. As you can guess from the name, reverse here, reverse we will take a mutable reference of the vector because it's like reverting the vector and needs to change elements in the vector. And swap also, you need to take an immutable reference of the vector and the location of two elements that you want to change. Okay, it's also a mutable reference. So we can try to print out the location of element 2 and check if that actually works. Okay, it works. So one thing here is that if the element if the index we put in for swap is out of bound, then it will abort, since we don't really have that catch error thing in move. So you may want to prevent this from happening by first checking the index is less than this before you do that swap. Okay, one last thing we will briefly mention here is that if the element in the vector has droppability, then leave the vector like this is okay. However, if the element doesn't have droppability, then we need to pop back all the elements in the vector, destruct all of them, then do vector destroy empty with that vector. Well, you don't need to know the details of this. We may or may not give examples in the future lectures, but you're gonna definitely see it in the later project. That's basically all you need to know in this video, and see you in the next one. Bye bye!